In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. And across 10,000 years of unending conflict, one name echoes louder than almost any other. One chapter, painted in cobalt blue, has stood at the center of the Imperium's history since its very founding. Disciplined, unbreakable, perfect. But perfection in the 41st millennium is never what it seems. Today we are going deep into the Ultramarines, their origins, their glory, their darkness, and the question that haunts every world under their protection. What does it cost to be perfect? And who pays the price? Before they were the Ultramarines, they were the 13th Legion. Thousands of warriors without a Primarch, without an identity, competent, reliable but undefined, soldiers waiting for something to believe in. That something arrived on the world of Macraga. Roboute Guilliman had been there since infancy, cast across the stars like all the Primarchs by the Chaos Gods, torn from the Emperor's side before he could be raised under his father's guidance. But where some Primarchs landed in death worlds, in war zones, in madness, Guilliman landed in Macrag, a civilized world, a world of order, law, and governance. He was found by Conor, a senior consul of Macrag, and raised not as a warrior first, but as a statesman, a builder, an administrator. He read, he studied. He learned how societies function, how economies sustain armies, how logistics win wars before a single shot is ever fired. By the time the Emperor found him, Guilliman had already transformed Macrag. He had reformed its military, restructured its economy, built something rare in the 41st millennium, a world that actually worked. When he was given command of the 13th Legion, he didn't just lead them, he rebuilt them from the ground up. He gave them purpose, doctrine, identity. He renamed them the Ultramarines, and they became something extraordinary. During the Great Crusade, the Ultramarines were unstoppable, while other legions specialized. The Space Wolves as executioners, the Death Guard as siege breakers, the Emperor's children as shock troops. The Ultramarines excelled at everything. Flexible, adaptive, devastating. They conquered more worlds than any other legion, brought more systems into Imperial compliance, built supply lines, established governance, left functioning administrations behind them rather than smoking ruins. Where other legions broke worlds, the Ultramarines built an empire. Ultramar, 500 worlds under Guilliman's direct authority, prosperous, stable, protected. A realm within a realm. And some whispered, quietly, that Guilliman was building something that rivaled Terra itself. That whisper would never be forgotten. The Ultramarines were the gold standard. Other Primarchs resented them for it. Some mocked them. Leman Russ called Guilliman a bureaucrat wearing armor. Magnus thought him soulless. Even Horus, before his fall, saw Guilliman as a rival. But Guilliman didn't care what his brothers thought. He cared about results, about order, about building an Imperium that could survive. He had no idea what was coming. When Horus fell to chaos, half the Emperor's sons turned traitor, and the Ultramarines were almost destroyed before they could even respond. It happened at Calth, star system within Ultramar itself. The Word-Bearers, once brothers, now servants of the Dark Gods, arrived under the pretense of a joint muster, a combined campaign. Thousands of Ultramarines gathered alongside their supposed allies. It was a trap. The Word-Bearers opened fire without warning. Orbital bombardment, virus bombs, demonic incursion. Thousands of Ultramarines died in the opening hours, slaughtered by warriors they had fought beside, trusted beside, bled beside. The Word-Bearers had planned this for years. They hated the Ultramarines specifically, hated their order, their logic, their refusal to bow to anything other than reason. Where the Word-Bearers had found gods in the warp, the Ultramarines had found none, only data, doctrine, and discipline. That rejection was an insult the Word-Bearers could not forgive. Calth burned. The star itself was corrupted, turned into a weapon. Civilians died in the billions. Ultramar, that perfect realm Guilliman had spent decades building, was invaded from within, and Guilliman was not there to stop it. He was fighting elsewhere, trying to hold the Imperium together as it collapsed around him. By the time the scale of the betrayal became clear, it was too late to reach Terra in time for the siege. Guilliman gathered his forces, the Ultramarines, their successors, their allies, into a fleet, an armada, the largest gathering of loyalist forces outside of Terra. He called it the Auxilia. He never arrived. By the time word reached him that Horus was dead, the war was over, the Emperor was broken, the Imperium was shattered, and Guilliman, the greatest administrator humanity had ever produced, was left to rebuild the ruins. What Guilliman did next defined the next 10,000 years. He wrote the Codex Astartes, a document, a military Bible, thousands of pages of tactical doctrine, organizational structure, strategic philosophy, everything Guilliman had learned across a century of warfare, distilled into a single text. And then he did something that broke the other Primarchs. He ordered the legions to be broken apart. Each legion, thousands upon thousands of space marines, was to be divided into smaller chapters of 1,000 warriors each. No single commander would ever again control an army capable of threatening Terra. No Primarch, no chapter master, no lord, no one would hold the kind of military power that Horus had wielded. The Space Wolves refused. Leman Russ called it an act of cowardice. Rogel Dorn of the Imperial Fists wept with rage. Some Primarchs never forgave Guilliman for it. But Guilliman understood something they did not. The greatest threat to the Imperium was not the enemy outside, it was the power inside. One Primarch had already broken everything. One man with too much authority, too much loyalty, too many warriors, and the galaxy had nearly ended. It would not happen again. The Codex Astartes was adopted. The legions were broken, and the Ultramarines, Guilliman's own sons, were the first to comply. They divided themselves willingly, seeding dozens of successor chapters across the galaxy. It was either the most selfless act in Imperial history or the most calculating. Perhaps both. The Codex became scripture. Other chapters followed it rigidly, treating its pages as holy law. And at the center of it all, Macragga, the homeworld of the Ultramarines, became the beating heart of the chapter that Guilliman had built. Here is what the recruiters on Macragga do not tell you. The Ultramarines are not protectors. Not exactly. They are managers, overseers, and Ultramar. That shining realm of 500 worlds is not a paradise. It is a controlled system, a machine. And machines require maintenance. Planetary governors who fail to meet Ultramarine standards are removed. Quietly, without trial, without appeal, without public announcement. One day a governor rules. The next, they are simply gone, replaced by someone more compliant, more efficient, more useful to the chapter's vision of order. Populations that resist are pacified, not necessarily with violence, though violence is always available, but with the slow, suffocating pressure of imperial administration wielded by warriors who have never once questioned whether their authority has limits. The Ultramarines treat war mathematically. Civilian casualties are not tragedies, they are variables. Acceptable losses are calculated before the first shot is fired. If a city must burn to preserve the wider campaign, the Codex has a doctrine for that. If a regiment must be sacrificed to secure a tactical objective, the data will support it. Lives are just numbers on a data slate, and there is something else, something darker, buried deep in whispered records and suppressed archives. Their gene seed, the Ultramarines, are stable, famously stable, while other chapters suffer mutations, genetic curses, degenerative conditions. The Ultramarines remain clean, pure, reliable across 10,000 years of recruitment and rebirth. That stability is unnatural. Other chapters have genetic flaws written into their very biology by the chaos of the heresy and the imperfect science of the Dark Age. The Ultramarines have almost none, and some genitors of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Those with access to restricted records believe this is not luck, not providence, not the Emperor's blessing. It is intervention, deliberate modification. Someone altered the Ultramarine gene seed, enhanced it, stabilized it in ways that should not be possible. Who, when, why? The records do not say. Perhaps they never existed. Perhaps they were removed. In Ultramar, inconvenient records have a habit of disappearing. Guilliman did not survive the heresy unscathed. At the Battle of Thessala, the Daemon Primarch, Volgrim, once his brother, now a servant of Slanesh, struck him with a poisoned blade. The wound should have been fatal. Instead, it was worse. Guilliman was trapped, alive but unmoving, neither dying nor recovering, preserved in a stasis field for 10,000 years, breathing, but not living. His sons carried on without him. They followed the Codex, because the Codex was all they had left of him. Without his voice, without his guidance, without his ability to adapt and reason and question, they clung to the text as though the words themselves could substitute for a living mind. They became rigid, mechanical, cold. Each century that passed without Guilliman widened the distance between the chapter and its own humanity. Warriors who had once been administrators and tacticians became enforcers. Strategists became zealots, not of a god, but of a doctrine. The Codex was their scripture, Macrog their temple, and the Primarch's empty throne, a constant reminder that their god was silent. Chapters that followed the Codex most rigidly pointed to the Ultramarines as the ideal, but those who knew them closely saw something the wider Imperium missed. They were not ideal. They were calcified, set like stone into patterns that Guilliman himself would have revised, questioned, discarded, and rebuilt 50 times over in 10,000 years. The sons had become a monument to their father, and monuments do not adapt. In the 41st millennium, with the galaxy cracking apart along the Cicatrix Maledictum, the great rift torn open by chaos, something changed. Guilliman was woken. Through the combined efforts of desperate allies, forbidden technology, and the intervention of forces that even the Inquisition cannot fully explain, the stasis field was broken. The wound from Fulgrim's blade was healed by the Eldar god Iniad, of all things, an act that the Ultramarines have never fully reconciled with their own beliefs. Roboute Guilliman opened his eyes for the first time in 10 millennia, and what he saw broke something in him. The Imperium he had built, the functional, rational, governed civilization he had sacrificed everything to create, was a rotting theocracy, drowning in superstition, corruption, and endless war. The emperor he had served was a corpse on a golden throne, worshipped as a god by billions who had never once read the Codex Astartes. The institutions he had designed for efficiency had fossilized into bureaucratic nightmares. His sons, his Ultramarines, had become exactly what he had feared, rigid, unthinking, treating doctrine as law rather than as guidance. He did not weep. He worked. Guilliman launched the Indomitus Crusade, the largest imperial military campaign in thousands of years. New Space Marines, Primaris Marines, built on enhanced gene tech that even Guilliman found unsettling, were deployed across the galaxy. The Ultramarines were reinforced, rebuilt, reforged, and Guilliman watches his sons now with something more complicated than pride. He sees what they became without him. He sees the cold efficiency, the rigid adherence, the small cruelties buried beneath the blue armor. He sees the governors who vanished, the populations who were pacified, the data slates where human lives became statistics. He built the Codex to prevent another Horus. He never intended it to prevent another thought. 500 worlds, 10,000 years, the greatest military doctrine ever written. The Ultramarines are the Imperium's shield, its standard, its symbol. When humanity needs a reason to believe that survival is possible, it points to Macragge. It points to the cobalt blue of Guilliman's sons. But beneath that armor is a chapter that spent 10 millennia slowly forgetting how to be human. Warriors who calculate mercy rather than feel it. A realm that functions perfectly as long as no one asks too many questions. They are not villains. They are not corrupt. They are something more unsettling than either. They are the ideal, built by a genius, fossilized by time, and now desperately trying to remember what they were actually built for. In the grim darkness of the far future, even your greatest champions cast long shadows. And in those shadows, you find the true cost of perfection. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Warhammer 40K lore, leave a like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you think Guilliman can save the Imperium? Or is he 10,000 years too late?